morning, Guam. On the couch here for a group chat. Thanks for starting your day the KUAM way, of course, starting lineup. My name is Chris Barnett, and this is my Facebook Live show group chat here with Victoria Lola Leon Guerrero of the University of Guam Press. And really, Lola, just wanted to kind of come and touch base with you guys and touch on a lot of the great stuff that you're doing, and also let viewers out there know that if they have a book they'd like to try and get published. I mean, I know it's a dream for a lot of people, and we definitely have no shortage of great writers on Guam. That this is an option for them. And then we'll also talk about one of your publications winning some big awards for the region.
Yeah, half a day.
Half a day. Good morning.
Good morning.
Start, I guess, with what UOG Press is, and just maybe kind of run us through some of the things that you guys do here.
Okay, so the University of Guam Press is basically the publishing house based at the university. It had been dormant for several decades, and then in 2015 was revived. And so I was basically hired in June of 2015 to revive the press and basically establish a publishing house for our community, both the university community, the academics here, and the publications that they produce, but also our wider Guam and Micronesian community in terms of being able to provide not just publishing services, because I think that's a really big distinction. I get inquiries a lot about, will you just print my book? But
right.
We are a peer-reviewed, established publishing house. So what that means is that for people who want to publish, they would have to submit a manuscript that would be blind reviewed, meaning the reviewers won't know who wrote it, the person who wrote it won't know who reviewed it.
Right.
And basically read the
so
writing.
no connects, basically.
Yeah, no connects, just words. So people will look at the writing itself and say, okay, is it ready for publication? If it isn't, then our reviewers tend to give really useful comments to help the writer basically continue working on it, and then they always have the opportunity to resubmit. But basically, the idea is that we have amazing talent, as you mentioned, in our community, but self-publishing can be very expensive and can also be very lonely. Like
right.
If you don't have access to editors or reviewers or the services that really make books complete. So I think, as a writer myself, that's something we always have to remember, is that nothing is really ready on the first or second or sometimes even 10th draft, right? We really need to be able to edit our work, and it really is beneficial to have writing communities that can help support that. And so UOG Press was really revived with the idea of creating quality publications for our community and region, but also keeping them in print. So one of the biggest struggles for a lot of our books has been, because they're self-published, without the financial resources, they often go out of print.
Right.
And so those are some of the commitments that we've made. And so, as I mentioned, we were revived almost 4 years ago now, right, June 2015. And in that time, we've managed to publish 16 of our own publications, and then we helped other organizations publish 9 other books. So
right.
in just 4 years, 25 new books have hit the shelves. Which really is indicative of the fact that there was a need for a publishing house in our community.
Right. And so when you talk about old school books that we remember from, maybe when we were kids, how about visiting some of those and maybe republish? Is that something you guys are looking at doing?
Absolutely. Well, one of the exciting things so the University of Guam Press is housed here at the
right.
Micronesian Area Research Center, which is really the cultural repository for Guam and Micronesia.
Right.
And so the MARC while UOG Press has been dormant, the MARC itself has been publishing things like these different accounts of our history. So for example, the Mariana Islands Random Notes from
right.
1884 to 1887. So the MARC has been translating and publishing European accounts of life on Guam, particularly during the Spanish era.
Right.
So a lot
really
of these
interesting
books,
stuff too.
Very interesting.
Yeah.
And so a lot of these kinds of books were printed but not really distributed widely. And
right.
so part of reviving the press has meant that I have been distributing some of these older books. So you'll find a lot of these older books at the Guam Museum store, for example, where they do really, really well, because that's
right.
where people want those kinds of books. But another big thing that we would really like to do is some of those seminal texts that are really almost sold out, we want to digitize and make them available as ebooks. So a lot of these seminal texts are things that people want to refer to for research. And so it makes more sense for us to kind of make them available online as opposed to sort of these smaller print runs that don't necessarily last as, don't necessarily move as quickly as some of the more recent books. So that is one of our projects this year, is to actually digitize a lot of these amazing Mark publications. Other books in our community that were not published by Mark, we are, of course, always open to exploring ways to do a new edition. So, for example, we just launched on Friday, and I'm very excited to say, a brand new edition of The Best Tracks on Guam. So, The Best Tracks on Guam was first published over 25 years ago, and by Dave and Bev Lotz. But again, they were self-published. They had done 4 or 3 previous editions of the book and many different prints of those editions. But in this most recent run, they had felt, we really want someone to go out there and assess the tracks and make sure everything is as we, make any changes, because the trails change all the time, update the photography. And so we basically hired a search and rescue firefighter and an adventure photographer to go out and reassess the trails. And then we decided to give the book a whole new look and feel to make it more user-friendly, so to speak. We printed it on laminated paper. We did a spiral bind. And so we took an old favorite, and all the bookstores were saying to me when we first revived the press, you have to redo this book. It sells out all the time. And so we're like, okay, if we're going to redo this book, let's do it and make it better, make it more accessible. Not that it wasn't, that it was broken necessarily and needed fixing. It's just that it needed updating and sort of modernizing. And so with our talented, graphic designer, Maria Cristobal, and then also considering all of the recent, deaths and accidents that have happened on hikes, we wanted to consult an actual search and rescue firefighter to do these trail assessments. And so you'll notice in the book there's enhanced hike safety guides and new features to make it more useful.
That's pretty cool. How long did this project take? Because I know you took an existing book, a beloved book. This book was in a lot of people's houses, when I was a kid, and updating it, is this like a couple years?
It took us a couple years because there's 44 hikes. Both Abby and Jared, who were reassessing the trails, have their own full-time jobs. And so, but also really like compiling it and really, like I said, making sure that all the details were correct and were double-checked and getting all the new photography. So that just actually launched on Friday, and it was a really successful launch, and we're really excited about it.
And I see what you did with making it laminate and then also spiral bound. It really lends itself to actually taking this book on the hike with you.
Exactly.
And maybe you're going to spill a little bottled water on it, or some of your snacks, but it's fine because you can wipe it down.
Yeah, totally. Or you can even fold it to your hike, because all the hikes are 1 or 2 pages, and put it in a Ziploc bag. So if it's submerged in water, basic rainfall won't do anything to this book. It's very durable. But if it's submerged in deep water, that may not last as long. So you can always pack it to make it last even longer.
I'm curious, I know that you're a bibliophile, but how much work and research do you put into the technical side of this, where, you've got this great text that needs updating, but looking at like the card stock or the paper stock and all that technical stuff, is that something that you had to kind of jump into when you came on board over here?
Absolutely, because you're right. Like, a lot of my relationship to books were with the words, with the editing, and with sort of the creative side and sort of the historical side. Like, I think a lot of my role as content editor is to do a lot of that fact checking and just that kind of work. And so shifting into this managing editor role, where you really have to see the book from when the manuscript's submitted all the way to it hits the shelf. Working with printers, it kind of was like learning the hard way, right? Because, we would work with certain printers and express, okay, this is the pound, how much pound we wanted, or how much GSM we wanted for the thickness of the pages. And for example,
even know what is GSM.
I know, it's sort of the way, it's another measurement of thickness of pages.
I see.
And so then, we had wanted, for example, History of the Mariana Islands. We had done...
this is one of my favorites.
Yeah, so this is an actual... it's the first published English translation of the History of the Marianas, which was written in 1700. The first publisher that we had, or the first printer we had printed with, we had expressed that we wanted 70-pound paper, and we got 17-pound paper, and so it was almost like newspaper print. It was so thin.
Yeah.
And this was a printer that we had gone back and forth with, and we'd been very clear about. We'd brought in a sample book of what we wanted, and so in that instance, we're never going with that printer again.
Right.
But I'm also learning like how to ensure that the proofing is there and so over time, and this was one of the first publications that we did, and so since then you'll notice like this, and of course we redid it with another printer.
A really great book. I mean, to read through and then to see how the Spanish looked at ancient Chamorros and this is very enlightening. I mean, I felt like with this book, you could just pick it up anywhere and just start reading it. And
absolutely. I think what makes this unique from some of the older accounts that we have is that it was edited by a Spanish scholar, Alexandre Coelho de la Rosa. And what he did is he wrote probably the longest book introduction I've ever read. It's like over 100 pages long.
It's like that. It's
but
like half the book.
Yeah, it is. But he felt that this book is important, but it's also significant to know what the value of this book was in 1700. And so he breaks down sort of why the Jesuits wanted to come here in the first place, how their reputation was sort of tarnished in the rest of the world, and that the Marianas was sort of their way of kind of redeeming themselves. And he also talks about the fact that everybody had thought this book was written by Father Charles Le Gobian, who's a French Jesuit, but in fact he found an older manuscript written by Father Luis de Morales, who had been here with San Vitores, but at the time plagiarism wasn't an issue because the Jesuits wanted them to all be saying the same thing. And so Le Gobian took Morales's notes and then basically wrote the manuscript in French, and it became a bestseller in Paris in 1700. And who would have known, And so this introduction kind of gives you that context, and then throughout the actual text, he gives you these like lengthy footnotes of, for example, if he talks about San Vitores, then he gives you a footnote on how he came from an aristocratic family. He had idolized all these martyrs and kind of wanted to die since he was a teenager. He was this kind of like real dark teenager that wanted to be a priest who would die and spill his blood for Jesus, The
original emo teenager.
Yes, and he goes on to change basically the trajectory of our lives forever. So it's a really good book here.
So I mean, there's just so many different facets to the academic, the historical work you do. Poetry, this is another one, I've had a chance to meet Mr. Kaneni. Cute man, I don't know what I mean by that, but he just kind of like, oh, Mr. Kaneni,
Yeah, and he had his big moment at the inauguration when he read a poem about Governor Leon Guerrero. Mr. Kaneni was named Poet Laureate by Ricky Bordallo, but had never really published his poetry altogether. So his wife, who has since passed away, and his daughters, they kind of collected all his poems and they put it together. And then, they were like, hey, would you be interested in publishing this? And different people had recommended that we publish him, from Senator Therese Terlahi, Dr. Underwood, Rosa Palomo. And so I finally met him, and basically we worked through his poems and we put it together into this book. And I think what's exciting about this book is that it really captures sort of the voice of this generation in a way, because the poetry style is very unique to kind of the way he learned poetry. And he said when he was a kid, like out fishing, he'd be like, everything would be happening in these rhymes in his mind, And
he's a rhyming poet.
He's a rhyming poet, and he's a rhyming thinker, right? So even when you talk to him, sometimes we'll just be talking like this, and then all of a sudden it's like in poetry. Yes, the original rapper. But he starts like talking about family and love, and then he goes into these really detailed memories of politics, like the controversy over using Adelup as the government offices, and details on Ricky Bordallo. And then he goes into self-determination and sort of feeling like America has wronged him. And then he goes into like these funeral and wedding toasts that he's given or been asked to deliver as a poet. So it's all that in this nice book. So
kind of maybe, well, when I heard that he was a poet laureate, it kind of made me wonder if that's something that maybe this administration can kind of revisit. And
absolutely.
I think we need to put more of the artists up in those positions and give people kind of something to aspire to.
Yeah, and I guess when I read the resolution, or I guess it would have been the executive order that Ricky Bordallo wrote to make him the poet laureate, he said anytime anyone needs a poem, they can call on him because he's Guam's official poet. And so that's why his poetry runs the gamut, right?
Yeah. And then let's touch on the kids' books you guys do.
Yeah, so here's two of our recent ones. So we've done actually 5 children's books entirely in the Chamorro language,
Nice.
with translations at the back and audio files on our website. And then we did this Chep Chep Unay, which is in English, but incorporates Chamorro values and some Chamorro vocabulary. Unha Anis and Sienna is sort of for, learning Chamorro speakers, new Chamorro speakers.
Right.
It goes through all the things that Anna does in her day, and it's very basic, easy phrases to learn that you can then use with your own family. Chep Chep Unay is really fun. It's about this boy named Juan who learns how to build sand sculptures from his uncle. And, they go on to do the sand sculpture contest, but the uncle wins, and he's kind of sad, but then when his uncle comes
Don't ruin it for us.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, spoiler alert.
Yeah. Well, the funny thing is a lot of our children's books, they don't necessarily have a happy ending. They're very Chamorro, not just in use of language. They're all kind of like the person doesn't win. The little girl, her family doesn't pay attention to her, so she turns into a flower in Imaling una Putnam. Yeah. So it always ends with some kind of lesson, you know?
Right.
But Sep Sep Unay is really sweet, and it's about sort of intergenerational sharing and how to get back up and try again.
Right.
And so we're actually doing a huge summer kickoff on May 18th at EPAL. We're calling it Unay Fest, and sort of in this honor, we're going to be doing our own sand sculpture contest. But then in the main pavilion, we'll have weaving lessons, talaza throwing demonstrations, duk races, and then the different groups from, the university and in the community that do like nutrition education, outdoor activities, cultural lessons will also be set up. So the idea is to kick off summer by promoting literacy, culture, and outdoor fun, so that families can kind of, use the books, but also use their own cultural knowledge to spend quality time together. And so we only have enough room on EPA for like 20 teams of 5 to build the sand sculptures, but after that fills up, the whole day should be fun. You can check out the sand sculptures, but also really explore these books. So. Yeah,
and I think it's cool how you guys you run the gamut from all kinds of different genres of books. And, on the kids' books, right? So people out there who don't have the financial means maybe have an idea, because a lot of stories start with an idea.
Yeah.
Can you walk us through the process? Let's say like I got a kid's book, I got an idea for one, I come in and I see Victoria. Kind of give me an idea of what to expect.
Sure. So that's really common. So I do have people that'll say, I've always wanted to write this book.
Right.
So what I'll say is, okay, let's talk through the idea. So we'll usually talk through it, and then I encourage them, okay, go back and write it. And then once they've sort of written it out and they've, I've also offered in some cases, people, can you look at it and let me know, do you think it's ready to really submit? I'm not one of the reviewers for obvious reasons, because I received the submissions. So, and I really care about getting the books out. So I really want to help a writer take that idea through the end, to the finish line. So oftentimes I'll look at it and I'll say, it's not quite ready. You may want to work here. You may want to work on this. And then sometimes we'll go back and forth. Other times someone already has a manuscript and they just submit it, right? But if you just have an idea, I'm happy to talk with you and get you there. Once it is written and it's in manuscript form, a lot of people think that they need an artist if they have a children's book in order to submit it. You absolutely don't. We have a pool of artists that we've already been working with. We recently did a huge talent call, so we got many, many more.
Wow.
And so what I believe in is that for our books, we need to hire local artists, that it can't be sort of, farm factoried out to India, which a lot of people tend to do.
Then you get Chamorro books with Chinese or Indian looking kids.
Yes, and really weird depictions of our cultural tools, but another story. So we always prioritize hiring local artists who can really depict from what they know of our environment. So when someone submits a manuscript, say for a children's book, I'll find the reviewers. If it's in Chamorro, I find Chamorro reviewers. If it's in English, etc. And then I tend to, when we find reviewers, we choose people who are either experts in the area that they're writing in. If it's a children's book, I'll be sure to include someone who's actually a parent of young children. And then we usually have a panel of about 5 reviewers, and then they get a month to review the manuscript. If they send it back, they usually send it back if it's accepted, but with comments for revision. So that it's revised, accept with revisions. So then I will work with that writer back and forth with revisions until we really feel...
Do writers have a problem? Because, I mean, you write something, it's like your baby, you turn it over, and then I think some people don't realize that's part of the process. I mean, once you submit your work in and it goes to this review committee, they can make the suggestions and the changes. And do writers sometimes have a hard time dealing with that?
Sometimes it varies.
Right.
It's not an easy thing
Don't
to
get butthurt.
experience. Yeah,
Right.
but I think a lot of times we talk through it or we think through it, and mostly across the board, most writers have been really grateful that people have given them feedback.
Yeah,
which has been really a relief for us. We don't have any like hardcore divas that are
Right.
like, no,
Yeah.
I'm not changing anything. It was even interesting because like with Mr. Kenani, his poems were his thoughts as they occurred. So editing, he was always like, I don't edit. Like this is my
puts it down.
poem. But when I had come back to him and you know, with Mr. Kenani, we didn't do like the computer editing, which I normally do. Like I would edit it, print it out, bring it to him, and he would respond with pen. And so the first time I brought him my edits, he was like, oh, I don't do edits. And I was like, no, just take a look, you know, Sina. And then we went through it. And then when he went through it, he was like, oh, wow, this was
Yeah.
great, you know.
Yeah.
And so it was really, you know, a lot of people may fear it, but when you actually go through the process, it really helps you get deeper into your writing.
It does. And as an audio production guy and radio, that's just kind of one of the things is when you produce something, you always want someone to come in and give it a second listen, or a few different people, and they'll catch things that like you didn't catch. So I assume the same is true with writing.
Yeah, and even me as an editor, if I've been working with a writer from like idea to publication,
Right.
like I've been looking at the same screen,
Tunnel
so
vision.
there's certain like, you know, little grammar slips I might miss. Like I
Right.
focus so heavily on the content that by the time the copy editing phase comes through, I may miss things here or there. And so sometimes we will hire a copy editor to do a final just straight grammar look.
Right.
Sometimes Dr. Monique Story, who's the Dean of Libraries here at the Mark, will also look over it because she's got a background. Her PhD is in children's literature. So often for the children's books, I want her to look at it. And so basically, you know, after it goes through that editing process, then if they don't have already an artist in mind, we'll go through portfolios of artists, choose one that they like, that they think will capture what they're trying to convey. Then the art process is another round of editing. So the artist will kind of do a few scenes, meet with me and the writer.
Right.
So a lot of it happens in sketch form, then it evolves into whatever their medium is, bringing color to it, all the way until it's ready for, you know, okay, we're done. Then we have to scan all the pieces in if they're not done digitally, and then we hire a professional graphic designer. And so we have really talented graphic
Yeah, it's kind
designers
of crazy
in our
when
community.
you look at these books, you don't realize like how many people you bring along in this process, and how many. I mean, it's basically you're creating jobs for these people, these photographers, these artists, these writers. And it's really cool. I kind of wanted to close, Victoria, on this
Sure.
award-winning book here, Linatla Portraits of Life at Letexan. And this is, can you tell us a little bit about the award that you guys won?
Sure. So we just found out last week that Linatla won the Independent Book Publishers Award for Best Nonfiction in the region. We got a bronze medal, and the region included Australia, New Zealand, and the Pacific Rim. So
Wow.
it was a pretty large
competition,
region.
right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so the award ceremony is on May 28th in New York City, and it's attached to a larger book expo where we'll actually be able to meet publishers from the industry and kind of attend like conference sessions. And
Right.
the book itself will be featured on a wall of new titles. So, you know, there's over 10,000 people that go to this book expo that'll be exposed to this
Better bring some copies with you.
story. Yeah, definitely.
And
But
I love this one because, you know, the timeliness of it. I mean, obviously, Letexan and the firing range and the build-up, and to document this area, I thought was very wise of you guys, especially given, you know, in the context of everything that's happening. And, you know, we might not be able to see these images.
Absolutely. And so this book is actually our publication, so it wasn't one that someone had submitted. We here at the Micronesian Area Research Center work together with the community to basically try. The reason we chose Linatla is that Letexan or Retidian is one of the only places where every period of human history can still be traced,
Right.
dating as far back as over 3,500 years ago. So there's evidence of human life there that you
Right.
can still experience. And so we organized the book into sections where we started with sort of like the lot to live, so looking at the origination of life in the space, so the geology and landforms, you know, looking at like the sea level and when it rose, and looking at the actual plants and wildlife there. There's a lot of omelet. And then going into the endangered species that are native to there. And then, you know, basically the turtle nesting, all of the sort of natural life that began. Then we went into the next period, Natlatla, to bring life, where we really look at the lives of our ancestors, particularly in the Lati period. So we start with all of the pictographs on the caves, which are incredible, like stories that our ancestors left for us, including their handprints. And then it goes into sort of the layers of cultural history in chronological order in terms of the artifacts found there, from the different pottery to the different tools and jewelry that have all been found there. This, for example, is a human bone that was carved into a spear. This is a dolphin tooth pendant. So really interesting, rare artifacts that have not been found anywhere else.
So this is almost like a textbook in a lot of ways.
In many ways, yeah. It's a very, it's funny because Anthony Jr. Tamayo is the lead photographer, and he's like, I don't think we should call this a coffee table book, because it looks like one, but it's packed with information. And so I do want to take this time to acknowledge, particularly by showing one of my favorite photos from him. We go into what it looks like in the scene, but this is a shot of the Lati, and Junior had myself and our volunteer Abby Crane light up each Lati, and then he kind of pieced them together so you could actually see what it looks like. So we went there at like 5:30 in the morning to get the best light.
Spooky.
Yeah, it really was. And so Junior had worked very hard. Dr. Mike Carson was sort of the lead author. He's an archaeologist that has spent over 10 years really studying the area, with assistance from Brett Story, who had studied with him. And then, like I said, Junior was the lead photographer. Dr. Monique Story and myself edited the book. I did a lot of the writing about the contemporary stories, so I was really fortunate to work with the families of some of the original landowners, who gave us also some amazing photos of their family living in this space.
Yeah, this part's pretty cool.
In the 50s and 40s. So, you know, through their photos, we were able to tell a little bit of their story as well, all the way up to contemporary times with the movement of Pratehi Latexan. And so I find this photo really powerful because right here is Lou Hernandez in 1993, their family testifying, trying to get their land back. And then later in the book, she's photographed in the same place, testifying again at the legislature in 2017. And so really showing how the story continues with this movement. It also looks at how the space is not just a thing of the past. The space is still used today. The repropagation of the Nelsoni cereanthes tree, Hagen Watch protects the turtles there. There's a lot of educational studies that occur, but also it's a spiritual place where people go for traditional knowledge and like to find omelet. It's there's rare omelet that's only found there. So I can keep talking about this book. I know you can.
But how long did it take you? I'm curious, because this seems like a 5-year. This seems like a long project.
Yeah, that took us about almost 3 years.
Wow.
So we had an idea, and it was smaller, and then it just kept growing and growing. And I feel that, you know, one of the most, like I said, exciting parts of it is that we really wanted to include all aspects of the space, and so it really required us working with various members of our community to make it possible. So from the landowners to Hagen Watch to the biologists who've been studying the endangered species to the, you know, Guam Preservation Trust gave us some funding. So there was so much of our people and our story went into this. So that's why I'm so happy that this is the book that won an award, because it's actually an award for
probably the one you worked
our
hardest
island. Yeah. And that, you know, it's really an award for our people, for our island.
It is, yeah. And I mean, you know, really hate to say this, but 20 years down the road, when, you know, you might not be able to access this area anymore, this could be the only way that we can remember.
Yeah, hopefully, you know, through knowledge, people will be inspired to change that, not make that the trajectory for this space. So that's the other power of these books, is that I think when people are armed with information, then they may be motivated to take a stance that they may not have taken before, just simply because they didn't know what was there.
There you go. Hey, these are very dangerous weapons we have here. Some of the most dangerous weapons ever made in the history of the world, books.
Yeah.
Victoria, thank you so much. So
Thank you.
You're here at the second floor of the Mark Center. Is there a phone number or something?
Sure, it's 735-2154.
And you have an Instagram.
And we have Instagram and Facebook. Just search for UOG Press. We have a website, uog.edu/UOG Press. And really all of our books can be found in, the Triton bookstore on campus and all the local bookstores and the museum stores. So, but if you want to publish, please don't be shy. Definitely contact us. Our submission guidelines are on our website.
Nice. And then this is, what is this, 42 bucks?
$42.
Nice. And this is, hey, summer's coming up, Christmas, always around the corner. Okay. Hint, hint. Hey, my name's Chris Barnett. Thanks for starting your day the KUAM way. Starting lineup, of course, is the Tuesday show. Group chat. Thank you so much, Victoria.
Thank you.
Esta Dios.
Esta.